What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? It is Matty P here with another Mad Monday. Marky D is off enjoying a little break, so it's just me coming to you guys live. But that's cool. That's cool. We're coming in I'm having a quick early lunch break from work, but I'm coming to you. I think the East Coast right now. It's starting to get late in the evening after 9:30. A bit earlier on the West Coast, but that's cool. It is your summer, so I think a lot of people are probably out enjoying, the warm weather. Might see us later on a little bit, whether it's not live or on the record side. Obviously, for the Steelers, it's a bit of a quieter period than usual. So from that perspective, the Steelers are getting ready for their camp. Kenny Pickett got married on the weekend. You know what I like? There are a couple of things that they did in their ceremony and their reception that I'm planning on doing for my upcoming wedding as well. So that was pretty cool to see. There are lots of Steelers there. I saw lots of Instagram stories. What else has happened? We've had TJ Watt on Football and podcast. That was awesome. I don't know if anyone's missed that, but that hunger for a Super Bowl, you can see that's there with TJ Watt. You also had the All Things Covered podcast. So Steeler Out West asked me about that probably a week ago, and actually he's there in the live chat. So did watch everything on All Things Covered. Thought about doing a video, but kind of they're their own YouTube show and podcast. So I didn't necessarily want to do a reaction video deeply to that. I want to keep things reaction to different news and stuff. But what I will say is I liked a lot of the conversation on All Things Covered podcast recently, where there's a lot of talk about Patrick Peterson, the slight that have been given by PFF to him. I think PFF has a lot of stats a lot of companies don't have, which is why I keep the subscription. I mainly keep it more from the college stuff, but they don't count things like half sacks. So I take when they rank a list of players, I take that with a grain of salt. And that's what Patrick Peterson was basically saying. He was saying he's primed for his best year. I think he's been primed for a great year as well. I did think they kind of overdid it though. But that's what you get when you've got your own podcast and YouTube show. You can kind of do what you like. So fair enough to Patrick Peterson from that regard. Love the conversation he had about Corey Trice. Love the conversation that he had about Patrick Peterson. We talked a lot about Corey Trice with Shannon White from BTSC Steel Curtain Network on our Touchdown Underboys show last week. He's joining us again for this upcoming week, which I'm really excited about to talk all things training camp, preseason, and season with him. Love talking Steelers with Shannon. Love talking Steelers with Mark as well, of course. Mark will be back in the next couple of weeks. But today's show, I wanted to do a couple of things. I wanted to talk to you about how the Steelers have set themselves up from a roster perspective, from a dollars and cents perspective of like who made sense, where did they make moves, what did they cost, kind of overview on that and then kind of give you a sense of how things are shaping up, the cap they've still got because the Steelers can still make moves. I want to look at I want to give you an idea of like who they're investing in longer term based on who's in the roster next year at the moment. What does their monetary value look like? How is that going to affect maybe which players make the roster and which players don't? And then there are a couple of other cool things I want to show you. The reason why we're going to do a War Room Series podcast, YouTube show that will come to you. That'll be a pre-record most likely. Wednesday, Thursday US time, probably more Wednesday US time, based on when I'm going to record it. All about Alex Highsmith and re-signing Alex Highsmith. But before we went and did that, I wanted to do this and give you a bit of a sense and on a bit of a lay of the land, for want of a better term, on everything about the Steelers from a dollar and cents perspective. We won't go too nitty gritty, nerdy accounting. That's no fun for you guys. But just wanted to sort of show you like who are the top players, what are they costing, some surprises, and all those sorts of things, and where the Steelers are investing, because it's actually what we see on paper, what we see from play, what we see about the hype actually shows up, particularly when you look at like 2024 and even the guys that are on the roster for 2025 as well. All right, so without further ado, I will get into it. So this is Over the Cap. Now, some people use Spot Rack. Some people like Over the Cap. I'm a paid subscriber for Over the Cap. I listen to their podcast from time to time. I'm a football nerd. I like the comparison, like these little reports and white papers that they do. Spot Rack doesn't really do that. The other thing Spot Rack will do, Spot Rack might beat the numbers for NFL teams and get there first occasionally. But Over the Cap only puts things in when they have full details. And that I really like. They also have tools you can use, like where you can cut and restructure and do all these cool things, which actually makes it a lot of fun. And what I love is that, like, I used to do this a lot when we were back with BTSC Steel Curtain Network on the podcast side. I can actually show you some of these things visually. So we'll be able to do that as the season rolls on. And particularly all the way fast forward to next February, we'll be able to do this through free agency. And you're going to really find some cool content that we'll be able to do. So I plug over the cap my paid subscribers, so I'm able to put them out there. But yeah, we're going to use them. But before we crack into that, we're going to obviously herald what Jeremiah Yoda says to the greatest fans in the NFL, to the greatest franchise in the NFL. 100%. I'm waiting on some Steelers merch to arrive this week. Got a really good deal on some stuff through Fanatics. So yeah, I can't wait. I'm pumped for the season, gearing up with all my t-shirts, repping it here as well. Love it. So great to see somebody in the live chat as well. I know it's late on the East Coast. I know it's summer as well. Tell me how hot it was in your location as well in the live chat. I'm keen to know. As particularly as it's getting pretty darn cold here. I just had the AC on myself. For the warmth, though, not the cold. All right, so let's crack into it. So obviously, probably surprised to no one, TJ Watt, highest paid player on the Steelers this year. No surprise there, particularly when you got a rookie quarterback. Cam Hayward fits in there as well. So these guys are getting paid over $20 million. TJ's just shy of $30 million. Then you got Deontay at $16 million. Now, this is where it made no sense for him to be traded due to the dead cap money that he would have. But a lot of that's based on actually his prorated bonus, not the roster bonus. And that's kind of the interesting thing, because if you actually looked at this year's number, he gets a roster bonus paid out, right? And so if they didn't have them, that's where the Steelers would have saved money. And actually, to eat $14 million in dead cap isn't terrible when you've only got $13 million on there right now. And a lot of that's voidable years and still paying off Stephon Tuitt from the big salary bonus they gave him. So again, investing in a defense around a rookie quarterback, taking the pressure off the rookie quarterback to have to score points, really key. Equally, Deontay Johnson, I talked about this last year of not signing him at more than 17.2 a year. This year, it's the 16.3 cap hit number. That's cheap for a top 20 to 30 wide receiver in the league, particularly top 20. It's cheap, 30, maybe not so much, but that's pretty cheap. So even though Deontay didn't get a touchdown last year and what have you, that's really good roster construction. Now, the other thing is Chooks. Now, right tackles are expensive. People probably, Chooks is good enough, even if you don't like him. You probably sit there and you're like, look, he's good enough at the value is. Next year, this becomes really cheap, right? So next year they can move him on, and the numbers are a lot less. I think they only eat $5 million next year. Actually, you know what? I can show you. I don't have to estimate that. We can show you their Chooks. Yeah, the dead cap's only like $3 million next year, and they say $8 million. So this is a really important year for Chooks, particularly when you think about like Dan Moore and him having to move maybe from Broderick Jones. So that like kind of is a really interesting thing. Still Out West actually brings up, why am I interested? Yeah, I think it's more giving people an outlay about how they're setting up the team. So that's why I'm giving you this overview and then what we're looking forward to next year. Because take, for example, we'll talk about Nate Herbig. And Nate Herbig's getting paid a lot more than what people realize, right? So from that perspective, he's a less likely to be cut, right? So then you've got a Kendrick Green scenario. You've got do they move Dotson, which is something I've talked about for 12 months. So it'll make sense in a moment. It'll make sense in a moment, or at least throughout the show. Daredevil says 74 Fahrenheit. Okay, yeah, so 23. Yeah, it's about, basically I had my AC up to like 80 in here just so I could get a bit warm before. But cool stuff. All right. Moving down the list, Mink is pretty cheap this year because they did the restructure. Mason Cole is actually pretty cheap for a center of his quality. So, that's something I really like. They changed around and extended Mitch Trubisky. $6 million for a backup quarterback is cheap. Last year, I think they were paying Mason like 3.2. I think the average cost of a backup quarterback last year was something like $9 million. I'd have to go and confirm that. But so Mitch Trubisky is cheap as well. So you're seeing, and this is, again, still out where you asked the question. The Steelers have invested a lot in rookies on the offense that have allowed them to pay a Super Bowl quality, for the most part, defense, right? And you see this in the roster, and it's also important for who they're going to have to re-sign over the next few years. Boswell, interestingly, is actually one of the players that's going to be on this team for a long time to come. I'd have to look at where the voidable years work. I think it's voidable in 2026, which is what this is. But he's actually one of the few players that's rostered on for the next 4 years, apart from Minka and any of the rookies that were drafted as well. So it's just Minka and Boswell, apart from the rookies that were drafted this year, signed longer term. So TJ is actually coming up faster than what people think. So that's an important factor. However, when TJ comes off contract, Kane would probably will have retired by then or will be in his last year on a very cheap deal. So, that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, let's say you go down the list, you see your Ogunjobi's there. That's a really good deal. I actually talked about, I went back and listened to a podcast I did when we were still with the Steel Curtain Network in January when I was talking about Highsmith and prepping the Highsmith show for this week. And I talked about bringing Ogunjobi back on an $8 million a year deal. Now, if you look at Ogunjobi's contract, it is actually only about like 5-6 million this year. Yeah, so 4.9 million. Next year goes to 13. The third year at 10, averages out at 28 million. So just a shy under 10. I said to bring him back in about 8.3. You're not too far off distance with that. So the Steelers kept that, but kept it cheap this year, which allowed them to make more moves. And in fact, that's one of the things as well, Steeler out west, that you rightly ask the question, like, why does it matter? And like the thing and it's a great question as well for anyone that's catching our show before as well, like for the first time, is that the way you see the Steelers are building, they're here to compete this year. Make no mistake, this isn't a we're building for the 2024 season. They're making moves, right? And it fits in with everything with the Khan artist and everything he's done. So that's kind of the other cool thing that you see. And a good example of this is actually making less than what I thought. I mean, we know Allen Robinson making like about 5 million, whatever, like in the restructure. He did a restructure when he joined. It's a bit more complex. But Keanu Neal, right? Because Keanu Neal's only making 1.5 million this year. They backloaded that to next year when the cap goes up, right? And this is one of the things I'm going to share with you about the beauty of Omar Khan. And I think the beauty of Omar Khan in his current role versus Kevin Colbert, who relied on Omar Khan for the finances, but Omar Khan didn't necessarily construct the roster in the way they wanted. So Keanu Neal, 1.5 million this year, 2.7 next year, 4.25 million. If you gave him a vet minimum, I think his one would be about 1.8 or 1.6 plus bonus. But you'd probably, an RFA tender would be about 2.3-ish million on him as well. He's only 28, 29, so he's younger than 32. A lot of us kind of pigeonhole him as 30. This is cheap. But what the Steelers are doing, and this only happens with finance, right? Look at the number on your screen right now. 0.7% on the cap and 1.1%. Now, that's not what I'm not coming from that of that's only like cheap. What it is saying is that the Steelers are basically taking normal finance principles of annualizing revenue based on increase. Like if you have certain amount, if you believe in cumulative interest, or not believe, but if you subscribe to that in your own personal finances, each year it's going to build. Well, the cap's a little bit like that. The cap is not a fixed 1 year thing either. It's a 3-year term. You save money this year, you get to spend it next year. That's a big myth that a lot of people don't realize about the NFL cap. But the other thing is the cap will go up. It will, just based on TV rights. So deferring your spending, I mean, you can get into trouble with voidable years. Like look at what the situation the New Orleans Saints were in last year. But the Steelers across the board, no matter whether it's a guy that's getting paid $2 million or a guy that's getting paid $10 million, they're deferring the spending for the cap to go up. And in that way, they're actually letting the cap play to their advantage better than anyone else. And that might seem super simple maths, but it's actually not being the case. I can tell you, I've been doing shows about the salary cap, whether it was when Marky D started and I started out in September 2023, and I do my own little research before we even had a show. But like, then I had a show within the next 6 months, the War Room series, which has come over to this as one of the streams of types of content we do. And this is a bit more War Roomy than a usual Mad Monday content. But this has not been the case for the Steelers all the time. But when you've got someone like Omar Khan that can make the moves, he's in control of the money, then relies on the insights for the players, this is the sort of benefit you get. And this is how you build a championship team, right? Like, this can't be like devalued, for example, right? And so this is Keanu Neal, Ogunjobi are two really good examples of that. Another good example is around Marcus Golden. Now, he's on a 1-year contract at like absolute minimums. He's 32. If they weren't competing for a championship and he didn't think so, this number's not there, right? This number's not there. And you might say, he's a veteran, he's washed up, he got cut, all the rest of it. He could have just waited it out till after preseason. Completely waited it out. He probably would have got 2 or 3 million more. I don't dispute that. Now, the other thing that I wanted to bring up is slot corner. Now, we brought Patrick Peterson in. They brought Patrick Peterson in before they drafted Joey Porter Jr. Joey Porter Jr. is not a slot corner. So, number one, people are like, who's the slot corner, for the Steelers? It's Chandler Sullivan. Sutton used to play in that role a lot of the time. Sutton left, and we can go pull up his numbers, but Sutton left on a decent deal with the Lions. I think it averaged $6 million per a year, right? Now, I'll pull it up on another screen. I won't be able to show you, so Sutton was someone that they played a lot in the slot, right? He's getting paid $3 million this year. Before next year, he goes to $12 million, and then he's on 2 voidable years. One's for $4 million, right? And the other one's a voidable roster bonus. You take him out to 32. So he's averaging basically, he's on 27 over 4. So yeah, averaging $6 million, right? So, but Chandler Sullivan's $1 million, right? If he can provide you with 70% of we'll bring it up, he's $1,092,000. If he can provide you with 70% of the play that Sutton did, that's beneficial. But the big one that I wanted to, where is my I scrolled all the way down here, is Armon Watts and Isaiah Loudermilk, right? Because Armon Watts statistically is going to provide you with a lot more than Isaiah Loudermilk. I don't think Loudermilk's come on like he potentially should have. They're both, I think this is Loudermilk's second last year was rookie deal. It'd be second his last year. But Armon Watts is the same cost as a 3-year rookie 5th-round draft pick. And Armon Watts, from a statistical perspective, has something like, I think he's got something like 12 sacks in his career, right? Actually, yeah, he's got about 8, 9, but he's got a lot more tackles for a loss, experienced player, depth 3rd or 4th piece, right? Another one that you guys are super all high on in the Steelers TDU community, because it's brought up all the time on our live shows, is Fehoko. Fehoko's sitting there at $940K. That's cheap. Super cheap. Now, obviously, there's rookies in this list, but I'm going to rate like the bottom guys. Joe Porter Jr., that number's not right because I don't think they've got the full part of his contract yet. But guys like Corey Trice, $771,000. Spencer Anderson, $769,000. Calvin Austin, $876,000. Connor Hayward, $908,000. Jalen Warren, $874,000. Christian Kuntz, Mark's favorite player in the live chat, Marky D, $940,000. Nick Herbie, $918,000. All these guys are going to contribute, and they're all under $1 million. And so, again, Steeler West, keeping it valid with your comment, and you're exactly right. Why is this important? This is why the Steelers have got money to make moves. And right now, the Steelers have $13 million in cap space. Now, usually they like about $8 million to do their business throughout a season. That gives them about $5 million in, I want to call it play money, right? Where they can improve. They're going to cut some guys off this, right? And again, we'll go through what that looks like, because the Steelers are bringing in, the Steelers aren't done bringing people in. Now, if you look at, who was I going to talk about? Montravius Adams, right? Montravius Adams is on $3 million cap hit. You save $2.5 million by cutting him. He goes $700 on the dead cap. So $2.5 million. So if we say the Steelers need $8 million to do their business through the season and run their practice squad, all the rest of it, they've got $5 million, add $2.5 million, $7.5 million. $7.5 million they can add, right? They can save $2.7 million on Kevin Dotson. You don't think they're not going to trade him when they're only going to eat 164? They're not going to cut him. He's too good. Let's say they trade him across, right? Even if it's a draft pick next year. Another $2.5 million. So now we're at $10 million. $10 million in cap space, right? Then they can go and cut my good mate, Gunnar Olszewski, and save another $2 million. So suddenly there's $12 million. If Tanner Muse works out for them and other guys prove themselves, maybe even Miles Killebrew gets out. So right now the Steelers have about 12 to 14 million in cap space that we don't even realize yet that they can go out and get more guys with. So this is why I say dollars and cents. It's not, I don't want to sit here and talk about deeply about the numbers. I want you to explain like where this team is headed, and they're here to compete for a championship. And the cool part is what I was sharing with you before, is the way that Omar Khan structures these contracts, even with avoidable years, is he defers the spending till the cap rises. So let the cap pay for your current success in the future. It's not robbing Peter to pay Paul, because you've still factored in the numbers, particularly the way the Steelers pay the roster bonuses up front. They don't guarantee contracts. It isn't robbing Peter to pay Paul, but it's letting the cap work harder for you. And that's kind of interesting. JJ52 brings up, why is Cody White still on the team? Maybe because his dad's involved in the process as the head of the, not players scouting, but head of play development or something like that. And so Out West responds with, because they need receivers for the offseason. Totally. It's why they bring in the long snappers, like the guy from the Bahamas. It's why they bring in the extra kickers on the team. It's why they've got 14 wide receivers. You've got 3 quarterbacks. You need at least 12 wide receivers out there. And if you think you're going to carry 5 and 6 on the roster, you really need another 6 to 7 to work with those other quarterbacks, so they're getting some level of reps in the season. You need guys returning the ball. So there's a lot of those sorts of things. That's why most teams carry 7-ish running backs through the preseason portion of the just the preseason is probably the easy way to say it. But as I say, this is a cheap team. I mean, you go through this roster, this is a very cheap team. You think about this. Right now, Chooks Okorafor is the 4th highest paid player on this team at 13 million average for this year. They got 13 million in dead cap hit. Now, a lot of people think dead cap hit's really small. This is a very cheap team that's still got moves to make. But look at the quality, the talent, the youth. Again, it's made so much sense, the moves that the Steelers have made. Now, one of the things the suggestion I have for over the cap is I wish you could break things down better by position within a team, so I could show you a bit more about the O-line and what have you. But what I can show you is hopefully the free agency tab, because it does update to 2023. That's the only problem. So I'm not sure it's going to work for me how I wanted to. Here you go. You can go 2023 team, Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay. Steelers signed a lot of guys. This is how busy they've been, right? Armand Watts, different team. Cole Holcomb, different team. Cardinals, Manny Jones, different team. Fahoko, different team. Braden Mann, different team. Miles Boykin, different. Now, you go, right now with the 90-man roster, all this makes sense. But we're not talking about guys that are filling out the practice squad. We're talking about almost all these guys can contribute. But when you look at the O-line specifically, so it's very easy to do all that. The Steelers brought in 3 guys on the O-line, right? Now, Raven Clark, fine, like that he's a practice squad guy. But Herbig and Siamalu, we talked about those guys. You go back to when we actually look at the team's cap, and these guys in here with Siamalu and Herbig start to make, I think they're both in the top 12. Why is that orange up there? Oh, I thought it was Bengals. I was like, what's going on? They're about in the top 12 there for players, right? So that's where, like, when you talk about Siamalu, Herbig's, Nate Herbig's a little bit down here, but his next year, well, when you look at his deal, it goes up again. But they're in here as some of these like top 20 guys that the Steelers investing. They wanted to invest in the O-line. But again, it's cheap. Let's take Siamalu, for example. Now, Siamalu is someone we're all super high on. Love it, what he brings to the table. Cheap this year, bigger in future years. The cap right now is the $224.2 million this year, right? Think about what it's going to be in 2025. It'll be like $280 million, about that. I think, maybe not 280, probably about 250. Let's call it 250. 10 million then is a lot less than 10 million now as a percentage of your cap. So his percentage of his cap, the cap for that year goes down. But that's based on the current numbers, not the future numbers. So this is what I mean. Omar Khan has set this team up for success fiscally in a way, or financially, whichever term you want to use, in a way that a lot of Steel fans don't necessarily fully appreciate. I know RTDU fans do, but when you're talking to your mate at the pub, some of these things are the difference. And these are the little things that have to go right for you to be a championship team. And these are the things that allow them to make the most of having a rookie quarterback. We all talk about that, having a rookie quarterback. It's not about going out and paying just 3 or 4 guys, because if those 2 of those 4 guys get injured, you're in big doo-doo, right? If you have if you have it spread across the team and talent and draft picks, then that helps you. So I didn't want to go too crazy into the dollars and cents, but I did want to sort of share with you these highlights around the way Omar Khan uses future cap to help current cap problems. I wanted to talk to you a way about the team are investing and why investing in landmark players works, spreading the talent, why draft picks are important, right? Move Dotson now. Why pay him $2.5 million if he's not going to be there, as your number one go-to behind Herbie? Now, the reason the Steelers may have to keep him is that Green's not going to provide anything. So I actually think it's Green and Dotson are the ones fighting for a roster spot. But yeah, you probably want to move Dotson. Gunner's gone. You see this. Montravius Adams is gone. We've said that for a long time on a lot of shows, but illustrating that through this example, it does kind of help you sort of see that. But the other thing is that this team is gotten young and cheap, right? I showed you the guys that are around there in 2026. Kenny Pickett's not on the roster in 2026. He'll hit his, 5th year. So that'll be his 5th year option. So they'll probably take it up in this particular year. But Kenny Pickett in 2024 will make, I wanted to confirm his number. He'll make about a bit more, $8 million or something. Yeah, $4 million, right? So his option's going to be in the 5th year option. We'll have to see. It's all dependent on the way the salary goes up. But he's not going to cost you more than $20 million that year, right? And you have TJ Minka. You have Cam off the books. I think Cam will probably extend his deal at the end of this season for 2 seasons so that he'll go to 2025. So play 2024, and then that's what he's on his current deal. Then move to 2025. But your bookend tackles $4 million, and in 2025. But in 2024, your bookend tackle, Broderick Jones is getting paid like $3 million. Yeah, 3.7, and your Chooks is getting paid $11 million. There are guys in the league that are mid-level tackles or that are getting paid $12 million a year, and you're going to get a combined $18 million for your bookend tackles. And we haven't even included Dan Moore in there, who will be on his final year of his rookie contract and is only getting paid $1 million. Like, his team is certainly set up for success. And the other thing is, if someone's not working out and someone's injured, they can do stuff. They can trade guys. Like, this team, if this team can hoard some draft capital and eat a little bit of dead money, they're going to have a dynasty that goes a lot longer than what Steeler fans, I think, can fully appreciate. Like, the Khan artist did all the work with Claypool. The Khan artist did trading up to get Broderick Jones ahead of the Jets. But there's the magic of the Khan artist is happening in a way that, in dollars and cents, that people are just not seeing. But that's kind of everything I wanted to cover off in this show. I wanted to set it up for what an Alex Highsmith contract looks like, because that's the other thing about the dollars and cents. This allows them to go extend Alex Highsmith. I think I said Patrick then before, but this allows them to go. The dollars and cents allows them to basically go and sign Minka Fitzpatrick. So yeah, pretty excited about that. But if there's anything else in the live chat, if there's any other questions for me, shoot them my way. Demonte Casey was another one I talked about, which I found was pretty interesting. I said to sign him for about $2.4 million a year in January. They signed him at 2.125, so they actually got him cheaper than what I thought they would need to spend on him. And next year, they've got him at 3.875 mil. So I had him at I think on the podcast I said 2.3 million with like a 500 to 600 roster bonus to do about just under 3 million. They signed him at 6 million. So it's actually pretty dead on. I was pretty surprised when I went back and listened to that January podcast, just how close I was. The only thing that was different, was my number one priority free agent from the Steelers was Terrell Edmonds, and we didn't manage to pull him in, and the Steelers would have had the cap to do it. But Keanu Neal is cheap. You got KZ, you got your 3 safety option, you got Patrick Peterson that can move around, and who knows what Tanner Muse might be as well, and you don't know who's gonna get cut in the short term. So yeah. Steeler West says, I've made this even interesting for you. Okay, cool. Steeler West, job's done then. Yeah, so that's what I mean. I didn't want to go into too much fiscal stuff, but If there are any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will keep it light and breezy and leave it all, you guys all back to your summer evenings. But Jeremy Yoda does say, the Khan artist, long live King Khan. 100%. This is, and one of the other things that Mark and I talked about in one of the mock drafts that we did I think it was late Feb, it was late Feb. It was like a Feb 26, 28 or something. I remember it. We talked about drafting a DT in the second round, which is what they did in County Benton, because of the cost of guys like, Hargrave signed a deal of $84 million. I think it's across 3 years or something. But then you bring in a County Benton. County Benton, we're going to pay, across his rookie contract, like $12 million, not even $10 million. We're going to pay him $7 million, right? But this draft, this is what's really interesting as well about the draft that we just had. We signed a lockdown corner, right? Minimum going to cost you about $6 to $8 million. He's going to develop into that. He's got a backup in Corey Trice. We signed a bookend left tackle. If he works out, and even if you had moved to the right or his backup tackle, he's like $4 or $5 mil, right? Easy. You signed the defensive tackle that I just talked to you about, so he's probably saved you $8-9 million if you think about Ogunjobi. There's like $40 million in savings, and this is why draft capital is so much more important than what a lot of teams give credit for. And it's the one downfall of Colbert. He didn't hoard this well enough. He didn't play up and down the draft board, and he didn't leverage players enough for draft picks. Omar Khan does that, and look at the result. Just 1 year. 1 year with the Joe Porter Claypool. Look at 1 year with the finances of this team. So Still Out West asked me 2 questions, which will probably close out the show. Do you think Khan brings anyone in out of interest before camp? I think he might. They might wait till the first week to see who. There's always that gauge of there's guys that have been told to go do their homework. That's why you saw Allen Robinson with Kenny Pickett and wanting to get better. I don't think he's at risk of being cut. But guys have been told to go do their homework, get better before minicamp. There'll be guys that don't do that. That's just human nature. Then Tomlin and the coordinators will make the cuts there, right? Or they'll go to Khan and say, that's a guy we've got. That's a guy that's got to go. Alex being signed before camp, maybe. I think it might even be halfway through. Remember the way that camp's going to go in preseason games. They'll want to do it. I think it's a bit different with TJ, where you probably have to rest TJ the whole offseason anyway. But you'll kind of have to wait and see what I've got in store to talk about with Alex Highsmith. But I will make sure Still Out West that I cover that question fully in the Alex Highsmith show this week, because we're going to go into what makes sense, comparing to a few people statistically and money-wise. I've got a few people, I've already done that work in January, but I want to have a relook at it after we've seen things out of the draft and trades and free agency as well, because that was all pre all of that. So we've got a better understanding of the market. I wouldn't say it doesn't happen. I've heard it's, I think I was listening to Pittsburgh, Chris Carter from Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He said they were closer than what people think, because he'd had a chat to him, but it was kind of seeing where it was landing. You got to think about the time they did the TJ deal. You got to think as well, is there someone on this list that they cut? But remember, I talked about the 12 million or so in this cap this year that the Steelers have kind of got hidden right now. They've got about 12 million to spend if they really wanted to. And that doesn't include a restructure. I don't think they restructured TJ. They only did Cam and Minka they restructured. So you can restructure TJ and save you more money, which is probably what they'll do to get Highsmith over the line. So they'll have even more cap to use. But Highsmith is only making $2-3 million this year. So you saddle him with a nice big fat roster bonus now, gets his money early. You back end it. I probably will save it for the show this week, but he'll probably be out a 4 or 5 year deal. Maybe you even have a couple of voidables there. And as I said, it'll be interesting to see when that deal comes out, how much Khan's let the rise in the cap that I've talked about, that annualized growth, and deferred those payments and that percentage. That'll be really key. And again, one of the things, like Big Ben was hogging like 30% of the salary cap most years, plus even more in some years, particularly in the more mid-2010s. That really pigeonholes you. So this whole Mike Tomlin hasn't taken the Super Bowl since 2010 piece is actually a really poor narrative, because no one ever factors in the money that was having to be spent in just one position. One of the most important position on the field, but you've got to have someone to throw it to. You've got to have someone to keep him upright, particularly as he gets older. And you've got to have someone to stop the other team's quarterback. So, yeah, but that's going to wrap up this week's Mad Monday. Hope you like the show. Leave us comments. Give us a like if you liked it. If you're not a sub, this is like your first video, or if it's a couple of videos in, give us a sub. Really appreciate it. The more subs we get, the closer we get to monetize. We get monetized. You guys can get prizes for cool comps. But with that, stay tuned for the Highsmith video this week. Stay tuned for Shannon White this week with me on TDU, boys. Mark Matty's enjoying a break. Love that for him. Can't wait to get him back fresh and firing. J-Devils' excellent show as always. Sick cunts. Love it. Steeler Out West, night all. Have a good evening, Steeler Out West. See you guys later.